Just because you have an understanding of the Bible in your head doesn't necessarily mean that you have Jesus in your heart.
Get right, get inside, get hungry, got appetite. Everlasting water, never again thirsty. To disputed lands, take a journey.
You are listening to Chad Schaefer on Disputed Lands.
You're getting another one this week. Two. Hey everybody, guess what? It's Monday night, and that means it's time for Disputed Lands. I say it every week, but this is like my second best favorite day of the week. It's a day I get to rest a second time. I get to turn off my mind from work, and I get to start thinking about whatever it is I'm going to talk about on Disputed Lands that night. And usually I get a guest or somebody like that. And tonight, man, I'm really pumped about this because in a short amount of time, I found someone who's a very kindred spirit. We're about the same age. We're interested in the same things, and it just makes it really easy. I told Darrin a few days ago, I said, if he lived any closer, we probably, neither one of us would get any work done because we'd be in each other's garages, probably getting in trouble.
We'll make that happen soon. But yeah, we wouldn't get anything done. So it's a good thing we're
probably wouldn't get it done. But not only that, you got two bald men on the show. I mean,
wow, what can you ask for?
I don't really know what more you can ask for on this show. So I just want to say thank everybody again.
Really shiny tonight, so I could just see on the monitor there. I mean, if people are having trouble reading at home, they can see the glare off my head tonight. It must be the perfect angle.
Yeah, they're just going to see a couple white screens, no matter which one of us is talking from all the glare. That's fine. They'll just have to dim their monitors or something. But I just say again, I want to send a shout out. I'm getting closer to having the store up. I've got some kinks to work out. You always do, but we're going to start having stuff like, what Through the Black and Tom and Jared are going to have. We're going to have mugs, shirts, just all kinds of products that you can buy, and all the proceeds from that are going to go directly towards being able to buy someone a ticket to an upcoming conference. So there again, many of those folks who wanted to come, it's just they couldn't afford it. Perhaps if they got a ticket, and that's one less thing they have to buy, they can get a gas or find somebody to buddy up with and get to a conference this coming year. So sounds like there's some potential there. With that being said, tonight again, as I said, I have my special guest, Darrin Geisinger. And I think I said Geisinger right. I think it's not Geisinger, it's Geisinger, right?
It's Geisinger, that's right.
Yeah. So I got that right. Yeah, Darrin, man, this guy is he's a very busy guy. He has his own media company, which he can tell us about that. He's a designer of books, covers, media. I'll let him tell us all about that. Not only aside from that, he also coordinated or has been coordinating the True Legends Conference, which is the one that Steve Quayle and Timothy Alberino put on, which is that I want to cry just thinking about what the logistics are and trying to put something like that together. I've been kind of in the know of what has to happen with Chris and Liz Bailey and putting on the Take on the World. And I'm glad that someone else. That's not something that I want to do anytime soon myself. And on top of all that, he found the time to write a book, which is why I have him on here tonight. This is our special guest, Darrin Geisinger. Darrin, welcome to Disputed Lands on Now You See TV.
Thanks for having me, Chad. It's a pleasure to be on. I'm excited about tonight and what Father has planned for us to talk about.
Well, there's not, I don't know how many people do know of you. Now, there may be some people who know of you simply because we got to meet those who were in attendance at Take on the World 18, got to meet your family who was present for that. So if you would just give us a little bit of your background, people who don't know you, never heard your name before. Who's Darrin? How did you grow up? How do you come to faith? And briefly, what got you to the point you are today? And then we'll go on to talk about the book.
Okay. My wife, Nicole, Nikki, and I are both from Cleveland, Ohio. And, that's where she grew up in Brook Park. I was from a little bit further south. I was born on a farm the year that my parents moved from the suburbs to their first ever farm experience. I was born accidentally that year. So my parents were not farmers and tried to be, and that didn't work out so good. So at 13, we moved off the farm into the suburbs. And that was around Canton, Ohio. And I went to school for graphic design and ended up moving to Cleveland. And I got a job for an advertising agency in downtown Cleveland. And eventually I met my lovely wife, Nikki, and she used to go to Timothy Alberino's father's, a pastor, his church. So eventually at some point we were having house church, and in walks Timothy Alberino. And when I looked at him, it was just a weird thing. It was just like I'd met him before somewhere or something, but him and I hit it off. And it wasn't long after that we were in Timothy Alberino's apartment, and he threw down Steve Quayle's big Giants book, smack on the table. I can still remember that. And it was then that I started to wake up to more truths, what the churchianity doesn't want to talk about. I mean, one of those things is the Genesis 6 narrative. Now I can't see how anyone believes in the Sethite theory, but a long time ago, yes, I was so Tim introduced me to what the truth of Gen 6 is, and just starting to deprogram. We were going to a mega church. And my wife wanted to start to pull out of that, and I wanted to keep going as is. So I give her credit. She wanted to pull out of that. She wanted to start homeschooling. And eventually we understood that we got to be more self-sufficient. So we had a nice house in Cleveland, but we knew we needed more land. So we moved out to Idaho for a while. And that I got a job actually in Spokane, Washington, and I was driving over the border from Idaho to there, and it wasn't an ideal situation. And I ended up getting a crash pad over there, and I was only coming home on the weekends because it was an hour. And boy, if it snows there, you're not getting home anyway. And we tragically lost a son, Philip. He was struck by a car. A guy didn't have a driver's license. He had heroin in his system, and he struck Philip. Philip was on his bike. He had his helmet on, and we lost Philip. So down from the whole process. And it's very expensive. Northern Idaho is very beautiful. It's very pricey. So at one point, my wife said, "What are the Ozarks?" So I said, "Well, where am I going to find a job as good as the one I have in Spokane?" And she said, "Don't worry about it. Just we'll go, and the Father will provide, and we'll figure out something." So we moved from Idaho to Southwest Missouri, where we are now, and so we got a larger property. We got a homestead going, and we got animals and a larger garden, and I started my own book cover company. It's called King's Custom Covers. So KINGS Custom CUSTOM Covers, kingscustomcovers.com. And I started doing book covers for people. And we're trying to build up a few businesses here. And then Timothy Alberino, and I was obviously still friends with him, and Steve Quayle contacted me and said, "Hey, how would you like to, you have a marketing background, you have a design background." And Nikki, my wife, used to work for United Airlines, Continental, and then United Airlines, doing massive organization. So our combined skills they thought would lend well to putting on the True Legends Conference, and we required all of those skills because, as you said, it's an undertaking, from hotels to caterers to you're just logistics and so much more. So that was exciting. We became the coordinators for the True Legends Conference in Branson, and I don't know. The rest, as they say, is history. That brings us up to today.
Well, I also saw that you were a guest on Skywatch TV. Our mutual friend had you on there, and you've been on there. I didn't realize you had been on there as a guest. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's something you can put on the bucket list, I guess. But
yes, I love Skywatch TV. I love Derek and Sharon Gilbert. I follow all of their work, and Josh Peck and Joe Horn and Tom, of course. So, well, Tom, we can get to that, but Tom's book Exo Vaticana, and there was another book. Those combined is what struck me, and some other things, Father, working on my heart. But that's one of the reasons I ended up writing the book. I know we'll get to that in a minute, but yeah, Tom Horn's Exo Vaticana was so it's just interesting. By coincidentally, we ended up moving pretty close to Skywatch TV. My wife and I started in Little Rock, Arkansas, and just rented a car and started driving, and we didn't really know where we would end up. And we ended up probably about 25 minutes from Skywatch TV, just by chance.
That's pretty cool. Now, you skipped over something, and I don't want to get bogged down into a lot of detail, but there are a lot of people in hearing that brief testimony that probably skipped a step or two when you said you lost a son.
Yes. Philip, we had four children, and the middle was a set of twins, Philip and Phoebe, and Philip was 8 at the time, and it was when we were renting in Post Falls, Idaho, and we were looking for a house, and just shortly before that, I really had a strong talk about safety on bicycles with Philip too, and he was a daredevil, and he went a street over that he shouldn't have, and he just pulled right out into the middle of the road, and as I said, the gentleman hit him with his car, and I was at work, and he was gone. I had driving from Spokane, I had to go all the way back to Idaho. So I don't know. I don't know if we're feeling down by that right now, Chad, but I know I'm going to see Philip again. I know where he's at. So
I know you've worked through it, but people know I wear my heart on my sleeve on here, and so when I heard that, my heart broke a little bit, and it's like, golly, man. So I have to process a little bit here to get caught back up to where we're going.
Well, and I admire Phoebe, his sister, so much, because she's been so strong through it, and the kids they have no doubt. We couldn't talk them out of their faith and trust that they know where he is and they're going to see him again. It's so nice to have that, and not as a crutch. I feel really bad for people out there that have to try to say, well, they're in a better place, and we know it's for the best and that kind of stuff. And they're trying to kind of whip up that emotional feeling. We know that we know that we know. No one.
Darren, I think we're frozen a little bit, but while we're waiting for you
to sure that I'm working out my salvation with fear and trembling, so that I make sure that I don't miss them. So that's added incentive for me.
We actually lost you for about a minute there, Darren. So we didn't get to hear any of that last 60 seconds. But
I don't know, where did I leave off? We know
that's
and there's no doubt in our mind. I'm sorry for my connection. We're going to get fiber optic this road here pretty soon, so I'm sorry if I cut out.
No, that's okay. We'll work through it. We've had worse technical difficulties in the past, but I want to talk a little bit about how we came to know each other. So, like, Nikki was at the Take on the World conference, and I'll let you tell this because I think this is so cool about how God works His providence. So, tell how did we come to know about each other, Darren?
Well, as my family being at the Take on the World conference, it was in Vermilion, Ohio. It was actually where the father-son retreat used to be, where I would take my sons. Langston is the oldest, and Philip both went to the father-son retreat at Beulah Beach. It was fun memories there. So we're from Cleveland, so Nikki and the kids went back. We have animals here and stuff, so I couldn't go. So they went to the Take on the World conference, and we are Torah observant. My wife spearheaded that, and I'm coming on about a year and a half or something into that journey. So I'm still learning a lot about what that means, and sure wonderful to take Sabbaths and rest, that's for sure. But we're on that journey, and my wife and children went to Take on the World conference, and she came back very excited about a number of things, but she was reading a book. She came back with a stack, but she was reading, the first one she was reading when she came back was something I couldn't tell what the cover was, but I remember her looking up at me and said, "You've got to read this." And I think we didn't even talk about what the title was or anything, but eventually she gave up her chair, and I sat there, and the triumphal arch of Titus made its way into my hands. And I didn't know what a triumphal arch, I can hardly say it. I didn't know what a triumphal arch was. And as I started to read it, it blew me away. I was like, this is a fantastic book. Because not only, and everybody here listening probably knows this by me preaching to the choir, but not only did it educate me about what a triumphal arch was, what it symbolizes, how we could it symbolizes all.
Yeah, I didn't. You didn't have to talk it up. I just think how God works to connect people is just so cool to me. How God works it out, and so I see Darrin, he posted something, you got to read this book. And it's like, well, yeah, I noticed when somebody says they got to read my book and they're talking about mine, I was like, well, yeah, I want to, all right, I like this guy already. So, but I clicked on your thing and I saw, well, this guy's an author too. And his wife was at the Take on the World conference. I was like, well, who is this guy? So I started digging into him, I was e-stalking him. And so he was writing the 0 G's, and I was like, and then we got to talking, right? And I started connecting. We shared a little bit privately, and I was like, well, I got to have this book. And you said, well, I'll send you one. I got yours. So, and this is where I get to share my part of the story. So these guys know, everybody knows, and a lot of the folks here in our chat are the same way, Darrin. Our audience, the people who watch Disputed Lands, are hardcore, right? They want the truth. And nothing but the truth, so help them, yeah. Okay, that's what they're after. And when you're after the truth hard, you spend a lot of time digging into the truth, researching, diving deep into stuff that you didn't bring before. It works the heart and mind, right? Digging into the scripture, right? It works the heart and mind. And it's good because we need that exercise. But everybody knows proper exercise includes proper rest, right? You can't work out every day the same muscles day after day after day without causing a strain, spraining something, or causing the overdevelopment of some muscles and underdevelopment of others. And for me, and many times, it seems like I'm been training for a a decathlon, or for something for 5-6 years now, and for the last 2 years. It's been that marathon, and it's like been nonstop, digging, diving, having guests on, wanting to be familiar, with materials and all that, along with my own personal study. It's just been like, I come to a place where it's like, I realize, what, even taking the Sabbath, even doing the rest, it's just like, I needed a break. But I didn't want to stop reading because that's part of what I do. I mean, this is part of my fun. So it's like, how do you take a break and rest and read and not read? It's like, well, I want a good book that I can read that isn't going to totally, just make my brain fall out of my ears, or be stuff that's going to set in my spirit wrong, so that I'm wrestling anyway. I can't just sit there and relax without getting mad or upset because of some bad theology or some lie that's being told. And you send me this book, brother. It's called Zero G's. There it is. In case you don't know right away what this is on here, it's a bike/mech. It's very cool. I want one in my garage and or a subterranean basement, a hideout. I just have to have one. But I chewed through this book. I mean, Darrin is a man after my own heart. He probably grew up like I did, reading sci-fi in study hall at school or whatever, and so I could just tell. I mean, you don't write this type of book and not have done that in middle school and high school. You just don't. He's read probably a lot of the same books I did growing up that were non-Christian. But for the first time in a while, there's only maybe one or two authors that I can think of off the top of my head that are Christian authors that write fiction that are even worth or interesting enough to read without being, they're just not good writing. They're just dopey. Stupid is another word I would use from my terminology. Just hokey. Hokey is probably the best word. They're just hokey.
Well, you know what, Chad, if I could interject right there, I had some of the similar, when I was thinking about writing a fiction book, I explored some of, truth or fiction. And I found that it was very easy for authors to fall into something. It's that, yes, your audience wants the truth. We're all trying to uncover this. We're doing our own research. And essentially the plot lines were average Tom and Jane, are running from here and there, and they run into these unrealistic situations. And then you get these big conspiracy theory downloads and a dump. And then you go back to their little thing where they're running from something until you get to the next. And I found myself never really caring about the story or the characters. It was just like, okay, give me the truth or stuff. And now I don't really care about these characters. Well, then if that's the case, why even, read fiction? Just go get the nonfiction stuff from Chad Schaefer or Tom Horn or Steve Quayle. Why would you even pick up so I decided that, if I was going to do it, I wanted to create a great story first that stood on its own and didn't look like a thin plot excuse to just cram in as much conspiracy theory or truther movement as I could. So the first part of the book, the first quarter of the book, I really try to break people from looking for that next conspiracy thing and really make them embrace the characters, embrace the story. And it should be kind of easy because it's not average Tom and Jane at all. You can see from the cover there, it's the year 2045. You can see from YouTube and Facebook now where we're at with robotics. The exo armors that the characters have are not the focus of the book. One reader described them as just a well thought out detail in the story. They don't talk. They're disposable. But it added an interesting twist that takes you, again, away from average Tom and Jane run into the big conspiracy theory. So it's 2045. The society's just come out of a 10-year global meltdown. And that's important because the whole economy collapses. And I believe that what the New World Order is going to do, birthing their one world.
I lost your sound again there for a minute, Darrin. I don't know.
So these characters are going out of a 10-year stretch of some very bad times.
Yeah. And, so we lost you again for another 30 seconds there, Darrin. So I'm sorry. So basically, where this story is starting is this is a story from a first person dialogue. And we're starting from the lead character, the main character, whose name is Garrett. And what we are reading in this story is really the collection of his journal notes, which is what you find in the, at the beginning. That's what you realize after, I don't know how many pages in, but 10, 11, 12 pages in, okay, so this is a journal. So this is a recollection of the events that take place. And who are the main characters? Tell us about the main characters in the story.
Well, there's the team that he calls it. Basically, it's Garrett's the main character, as you said. Rebecca, but he calls her Beck, and Jackson he calls Jay, and Pac, Big Pac, is the big teddy bear character. So
in my head, his name's Pac, but you go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, I can't totally go into that exactly, but
yeah, it's in the book, but
where he gets his name in the book.
Yeah, you get an explanation of that later in the book. So
right.
So, but here's the cool thing, and we're not going to give away the book, folks. So here's what I want to first point out. CB, I do want a bat cave. What boy growing up in the country doesn't want a bat cave? I mean, that's a given. But the second thing is homeschoolers out there who have teenagers. Okay, you want them to be entertained, to take a break, and they're still getting the truth. Here you go. Get this book. Darrin, you saw how quickly I read through this. It literally was about 2 days. I sat down. It hit me on 2 days. I started reading it on a day that I was working, which is something I don't normally do. And I was really honked off that night. I had to start my job. And then the next day was a day off, and I read through most of the rest of it and then finished it off the next morning. But you're saying
something about it's good for teens, but I would say what's funny, kind of from the cover.
I wasn't going to say just teens.
Yeah, well, from the cover
I'm 45.
And the way that we it so far, I would think it sounds like man cave fodder. It's funny. Women have been 75% of my audience so far, and the reaction from them has been the most outspoken. So despite the cover, despite the technical sci-fi, there's a lot of relationships trying to leave out any kind of that aspect. And so far, 75.
It's probably about 50-50, Darrin. You know this as well as I do. Women are communicators, and they do talk. So there's about 25% of the guys out there who would have something to say. They just don't say it. So I'm guessing it's probably more guys than you think are out there, is what I'm saying.
Right.
There's guys like me, but I'm 45. I absolutely love the book. But so we get this story, and you have done a masterful job of weaving in some real life hard decisions and conflicts and stuff that the characters have to deal with that just really draws you into the character. One of the characters that I was most fascinated with, of course, is the lead, Garrett, who's the main story, but his story with Beck. You have a way of drawing us into, because Beck in this story, she doesn't come from a perfect house or a perfect background. And you have some, I'm not going to give away the details, but it deals with abuse and parental abuse and bad home situation, but it really does draw you into the characters. Now, my question is, I've thought about, of course, writing fiction from time or two, before, and I just thought, it's really hard to write a book. I mean, there's just no bones about it. I mean, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, it is a lot of work. So tell me about the process you used when you were developing these characters. What was that like, and how did you go about it? Before we move on with kind of the story and what they're dealing with, how did that look like for you?
Developing the characters, boy, that's tough. I think
I'm not going to throw you softballs.
Well, I don't know if it's Stephen King who said, or somebody said, that a good author is not writing a story, he's watching it unfold and recording it. And that's kind of how I felt. I really, as I started to get into it, I felt like I was watching it take place, and I was just writing it down. And sometimes what the characters did surprised me. I know that might not sound be understandable, or that might sound bizarre to somebody, but
did you create character sheets where you wrote down the statistics on the characters and traits and personalities?
I didn't. I did do a timeline because there was so much that this story starts right in the middle of a long story before it and after. So I created a timeline so that I made sure that I had ages and dates and when this would happen. And as they look back, Garrett would be this old by this time. And so I did have to do some planning, and it's going to be at least a 3-book series as I'm planning it right now. So when you have a trilogy, you have to think big picture. You can't just, and what's going to be in book 1, what's going to be in book 2. So yeah, it was hard to come up with some of it. And
well, let me ask you this then. So you didn't develop character sheets or anything like that. So did you? You said it unfold. Did you have any? Did you have in mind a direction you wanted it to go, or you said you laid out a timeline. Were there certain things that you wanted to make sure that you touched on in there?
Oh, sure. And I think people will, as they're reading the book, they will say, well, some people. The Jamie Walden, somebody might know that name, said that, wow, I can't believe it. The stuff that I've been researching for the last 10 years, this is how it all weaves together. Now it all makes sense. How this aliens, quote unquote, talk about where.
Hey, Darren, I don't know if you can hear me. Turn your camera off for a second for me, if you would. We're having sounds like a connection issue again, and we've lost you there. So perhaps if you turn off your camera, we might be able to get you a little bit.
Chad,
there?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you. We lost you.
I would like to apologize to everybody for that. And there's nothing more frustrating when you're trying to listen to something and have those connections. But yeah, not much longer. So sorry.
No, that's okay. Do me a favor, and not that we don't like seeing your face, but maybe turn off your camera, and that might reduce the bandwidth load a little bit for you.
And that might help people not have to see me anyway.
No. I just don't. I just want people to be able to hear you. So unfortunately, you're going to have to back up and tell us the last minute and a half of what you were saying again.
Okay. I think we were talking about just how much did I plan out? What did I want to get into the story? Well, I guess I was recording it. I wanted to see where it went. I didn't want to force it, but I think for people who are in the truther movement, who have the Tom Horn, Steve Quayle nonfiction books, maybe Michael Heiser or Dr. Michael Lake, and they see the research, from Skywatch TV, Derek Gilbert, Josh Peck. What I wanted it to do would be a fiction book that can hang respectfully alongside those on your shelf and not be, a poor excuse at fiction. So I wanted something for that audience, and also, for people who out there who have a loved one, any age, any Alberino, and but they would read an interesting fiction book that weaves in some of that. So if you're looking for a gift, I wanted it to be something someone could hand to someone, and it wouldn't be peachy, and it would be an interesting story that kind of socked you in the gut with some of the truther stuff out that we track.
Yeah, and so
for 2 things, yeah.
So it's very interesting. Some of the things that you talk about or address that comes up in the storyline, or the Vril, tall grays, aliens, those who call themselves the messengers. We get into some kind of some really very much an end times, end of days scenario with things taking place on the earth with the consolidations of government and how you see this playing out, which was very intriguing. Now, I will say this. One of the things that caught my attention, one of the things that I will mention about in the book is this council. It's called the Council Resplendent of Light. And I got to tell you, Darren, when I've considered exactly how the end times government is going to look like, these 10 nations that we see come about who are given the ability to rule for 1 hour and how that would take place. I've often wondered how that would look and what kind of words they would use to sway the world. I got to tell you, you did a masterful job because, and I even told you this over the phone, the things that you have this council saying and some of the stuff that they bring about was so realistic and so perfect in exactly how I see them speaking and sounding and acting. It made this book, even though it was fiction, very real for me. I just got to tell you, you did a masterful job. I just want to tell people online, it's really hard to talk about this book without giving it away because.
Well, I can tread that. So the messengers have arrived and they save us seemingly on the surface. They're saving humanity from this 10-year blackout. I call it the meltdown in the book. Right. And so the messengers are these hidden, we don't know what they look like, but they're turning the lights back on. They're getting the food shipping again. And we're finding out is what was the demise. Here's the curve that I throw. It's the Illuminati. They are the ones that that caused the meltdown to do depopulation, and they're the villains. And so, what we suspected all along, the government, Hollywood, the elite, they were doing all these things that we're suspecting. And so the messengers intervene via some last resort clause that they can only do if like a species is going to go to extinction. So now you're in this new world where there's these hidden cosmic benefactors out with Hollywood, out with politicians, and now we, the people, are going to make our own future, and that's where the Council of the Resplendent Light comes in. They're picked by the messengers. People have channeled them, or they make contact, and these average plumbers, nurses, make up this large council, and they communicate with the messengers, and it's very much a socialistic society that's forming. Once it was about the elites and the haves and have-nots. Now everybody should be sharing. So it's just this new reality that people are, and lots of things are illegal now that weren't, and some things are legal that was illegal. It's a completely new world that these characters are trying to come to grips with, and humanity has a host of problems we're still trying to solve, and we're bugging the messengers for the cures to this rabid blood cancer that's still taking out many of the human survivors that made it through the meltdown. So we're on pins and needles, where they're giving us a lot of solutions, but maybe not fast enough. So tensions continue to arise, and that's when later in the book, the messengers give the first 12 of 36 truisms to humanity. It's basically what saved their race.
Right. So Darren's cut out again. So the end of the sentence is these messengers who come have intervened on some galactic clause that allows them to intervene with the human race. And they had one time in their ancient past in the story had almost been wiped out too, but they had these truisms that saved their race, and now they want to pass them along to the human race to save them too, because if they follow these truisms, then they can find, the human race can find their way to enlightenment as they have been.
Right, and if old-time religions weren't archaic enough, this will really put the nail in the coffin of Bible scripture believing remnant, because now it appears as though God wasn't our creator anyway. Either these people, these things are our creator, or they've been around. It basically throws the whole creation story out, just their existence. So that's what I kind of pictured as the great falling away, the great apostasy, is that just their appearance on the scene just makes us doubt everything. And so there's not many believers left. And then you add into these truisms, basically really just chuck out religion, and saying that's what was one of the things that doomed their race a long time ago. And if we don't get rid of our dogmatic beliefs, it's going to doom us. And all around is evidence of that. Right now, Chad, we're living in a time where religions and differences are making constant strife, constant tension, and it doesn't change in my book. And so when they show up on the scene, they say, see your history. You know, religions were given to you as a gift a long time ago to unite, and they only divided. Get rid of them. All of you are saviors in your own right. And so these characters who come from homeschool, who come from, Bible studies at home, are now watching themselves become Neanderthals as people adopt the cosmic New Age view, and they're seen as barbarians who are holding on to, are you kidding me? You're holding on to old scriptures. And that's not even the biggest reason why I wrote the book. The biggest reason why I wrote the book is I believe that there's going to be a humanity 2.0, where we are going to do conscious evolution and upgrade. And so the messengers are also dangling that carrot. Well, what's wrong with our DNA? What's wrong with us? And perhaps they can upgrade us to live longer and be disease free and to have a host of greater abilities. So not only are the characters facing the daunting task of watching everybody adopt the modern view, the new movement, and get rid of religion, but they're going to eventually start seeing humanity 2.0 come online, where they're going to be left behind if they opt out.
Yeah, and so I'm going to do a little backtrack here too. So how these characters are involved, again, is that the principal character, his family was very well off, and his father and family are Christian, but they were very well financially off, and that plays an integral part in why they are cores at this story that's being told to begin with, is because of Garrett's dad and a friend of his that was also working on a projects together, which have a lot to do with this cool looking thing that it's a mech bike kind of thing that they get to, that he was being trained to actually working in his bat cave down there. So that's what brings them into the story, is that they were on the cusp of the technology and on the leading end. There's parts where you have in here where his Garrett's dad, who's missing at the beginning through most of the story, his father is missing. And that's part of the big mystery that kind of draws you in and wraps you in, want to go along. It's just him and his mom, and their dad's missing. We don't know right away, but he worked on this tech stuff. And one of the other main characters in here, Newt, is the guy that's living in the bat cave that's working on this stuff. So there's a lot of technology type stuff in here that's interesting. And Garrett, I called you Garrett. Darrin, part of this cool thing that I really love, one of my favorite parts in here is, and I'm not going to give away every page here. They'll have to get the book and see it for themselves. Is I really like this right here. Garrett's journal sketches, hands off. This was before he put this in this book. Darrin had this on his office door when he was working on the book, I think. Yeah. He cut off the button that said "No girls allowed." It said "No girls allowed" underneath, I'm pretty sure, on there. But this, dude, what you sketched out, I'm pretty sure on your own. I mean, dude, I mean, that's just cool. I mean, these things he sketched out, and there's like 14. I think there's like 14 pages, close to 14 pages of this.
20. There's 20.
20 pages of these sketches.
For anybody out there who's thinking this sci-fi thing could be too technical and they wouldn't know what a brawler suit was or a caliber, what I, in writing I didn't make character sheets, but what I wanted to do was not just talk in an obscure, kind of vague way about these exo armors that were developed. I wanted to know exactly what they looked like so that I could describe them vividly. So then I had the idea, since it was first person book, that it would be Garrett is journaling it. And so he starts to sketch a lot more, and his mom's worried he's going to lose his love for writing and start drawing too much. So, but he always likes to sketch all the cool stuff that they're into. And his mom catches them, of course, and says, keep writing.
Am I
so
right?
She's always on them about that.
Am I right underneath here? It said no girls allowed.
No, I'm telling you, it's for me. If I'm looking at this interview, I would definitely think this was only for boys and stuff. But it's 75% have been ladies so far, and they like it.
A teenage boy. I mean, I just saw this as a thing. I mean, I'm just thinking back to myself as a guy who's, grown up in 5 or 6 and puts on his door, no girls allowed on the door in this little post. It's just,
I think that's probably where I get the idea, something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
people might be about the title. The title is kind of weird. People are like, well, what is the gravity thing about? What is G's about?
Yeah. What I'm saying by that, and then I'm going to let you go into that, is it's endearing. This whole thing, it just, the thing about a good fiction story is that it is not everyday real life, but it's possible. And you can see yourself in this story. You can see yourself living the story that's taking place here. You feel what they're feeling, you see what they're seeing, and you get emotionally involved with the characters. And you end up having hopes for them or wanting stuff to take place during the story. And so all I'll say is that little thing like this at the beginning, the sketches thing, is just another part of this book that was just like, it's like it made me part of the story. I could see myself in it. It was identifiable. So that's all I wanted to say. So 0 G's. We've talked about a lot of things, but this title says 0 G's. What the heck?
Yeah, so I can't give exactly away where that comes from, but the gravity instance, most people don't have that as an element in their end times scenario, but a few things made that come about. But then as I was playing with that as an interesting vehicle to make the story unique, there were some things that came up. Was Steve Quayle on some interview said that he felt that there was going to be gravitational anomalies as one of the signs of the end. The scriptures say the earth is going to wobble. And also, I felt like all I can say as a hint is think lying signs and wonders. So it appears as though that the gravity is fading on Earth, and that's definitely got us on the feet, and we're bothering the messengers at length to understand how we're going to deal with that. But one of the, so it's a multi-pronged thing. I wanted to use that as a vehicle to make the story very unique and interesting, not a rehash, not what other people have done. So it's a factor there and making something you've never read about. But just think lying signs and wonders and how that's going to and the earth is going to wobble to and fro, and earthquakes, those are included. It's really a time, it's the beginning. The meltdown was the beginning.
I lost you again, Darren. Sorry about that, buddy, but it looks like I've lost you again here, so I'm just going to... So the 0 G's, he's not going to give away where that comes from, so I'm not going to give it away either. You'll just have to give the book and read it. but it has to do with some of the lying signs and wonders that are taking place on the earth at this time, and how that looks in Darrin's vision of this creation in his book entitled Zero G's. It's again, he's right. I've read a lot of fiction books, and I don't recall one of them where this was an instance that was being brought up if it wasn't some type of foreign planet kind of scenario thing. But this is right here on the good old Earth, terra firma, and they're having to deal with that kind of a lying sign and wonder. Is this Darrin? No.
Off. At what point did I cut off? Do you need me to clarify anything?
We lost you for 2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, again, I just apologize to everybody. I don't know. Maybe I was going to say something I ought not. Maybe I was going to give away something. Just think lying signs and wonders.
Yeah, just think lying signs and wonders, and that has to do with zero G's. It's very cool. I was just telling everybody I'd never seen anybody work this into a fictional book that wasn't some kind of off planet kind of deal in space or whatever. But this is good old Earth terra firma and has to do with the lying signs and wonders, and that's all I was going to say about that kind of thing, because they'll just have to get the book and see how that plays into it.
Another hint too: the armor, the subtitle in the Armor Eternal doesn't have anything to do with an exosuit. That's kind of a trick, but I can't give that away either. That's something else.
So another thing we learned: these suits are powered by 0-point energy. So this is 0-point energy. We've talked, again, anybody who's looked into these things have come across at least once, twice, maybe 5 times, talking about there are other sources of energy that are readily available, even today. This is true. That is kept from the populace because it's a means of control, money, and power. I mean, if these things were readily available to people and they could accessible and they could build these kind of things themselves, then they wouldn't be reliant on the government to provide. And 0-point energy is a part of this. It's what powers the suits that these guys wear, the masks.
And if I cut out, I'm almost afraid to talk, because if I cut out, you just take over, Chad. So I'll talk quickly, or I don't know, if I cut out, you just take over. But that goes back to the government not being trustworthy, the petrodollar, the system, and they're really keeping these things from us. And meanwhile, we all suspect there's this breakaway civilization going on behind the scenes. And in my book, I point out that they already had invented zero gravity craft in the 60s. And basically the space shuttle program was just a sham, and they blew it up on purpose just to because they already had craft that could cloak, and so many people suspect that this breakaway civilization is happening. So when this all melts down and the new society is rebirthing, now we pulled back the curtain and we see the wizard that's behind there, and now we get these fantastic technologies, the anti-gravity, the 0-point energy. So if anybody's interested in those topics, this is certainly a book for them.
Yeah, and one of the part of the main story is because these characters and the work that their father did in this book series has right them at the very heart. That's I was telling Darrin, it's like this story is possible, or could be seen as possible, because it's a story that's worthy of being told. That's what makes this story the story that it is. Part of that story is that they find out that there's a connection here to a real what would be called a conspiracy story today, but it's not conspiracy. I mean, there's documents that prove that there was these folks. The Collins elite is worked into this story when you get into chapters 6 and towards the end, 6, 9, thereabouts. So, I mean, you got that element in there. There's battles and stuff that have to take place. There's how I got to tell you what's really is how this story starts off. First of all, kudos to you for the challenge of starting a book. I talked again privately about that, but starting a book, beginning a series starts as like that. There's so many things that you got to consider. There's so many things you want to say in setting the ground. It is not an easy task. I take anybody to task who wants to criticize the starting of any book, who's never attempted it themselves. Let me just say right now, you ain't got a clue. And you best just keep your mouth quiet, because until you try, I don't want to hear nothing from you. But where was I going with that? So starting this task is the main character's story. He goes from really, I mean, there's a couple things that are special about his family. His family is part of the upper class. And while his everyday life is normal, there's a little bit of stuff that's abnormal for him, but he just thinks of it as cool. But how his life gets literally flips from being what would be a normal teenage, because these characters are teenagers that are in their late teens, that you're following in this, the character's name in the beginning. Their life goes from everyday normal, day in, day out, normal teenage stuff that they got to deal with, etc., to bam, their whole life changes in a day, in an instant, and they've got to reconsider and grow up really quick into considerations. And I gotta ask you this. Obviously, to make a story worthwhile, you got to pull a lot from, well, I suspect this is what you got to answer for me. How much did you pull on maybe past personal experiences that found their way into this fictional story? Or were there other people's stories that you worked into this book to make it seem so realistic? Tell me.
Well, I mean, it's as much as if anybody's tracking this program tonight, you'd think that my greatest delight is in the techie parts, and the exo armors, and the future 0-point energy, and then is there aliens? Actually, my favorite part by far is the character interaction and how they think and deal with relationships and crisis. And so that's what I enjoy doing the most. So maybe that's why it comes off as a high point. I mean, there's nothing more boring than a robot for a story. That's why my story is not about the exo armors at all, despite the way the cover looks, despite the illustrated section. It is about the characters, because I know it's what resonates with people. We don't resonate with robots. We resonate with crisis, with heartbreak, with disappointment. And so Garrett, the main character, is always second guessing himself and always failing and trying to overcome the odds and himself. And then he's got Beck to overcome as well, because she's always a step ahead of him mentally, physically, skill wise, and across the board. So that keeps him on his toes.
Yeah. So did you draw? Obviously, you draw on what you know of men in life and things like that. Were there any stories true to you and true to that found their way into these characters, or will find their way into these characters on that personal interaction?
It's hard, Chad. I mean, no, this is pretty. I think that this story is pretty unique, and so it is hard to draw from real life, because these guys are going through things that you and I and the past has never gone through, at least not since Noah's time. I mean, so all flesh became corrupt, and it was not what God created then. And that was what was facing Noah and his family. And I believe that these characters are coming into a time unlike any other. And Christ even said it himself, the time of Jacob's trouble is unlike anything the world has ever seen or ever will again. And if the times were not made short, there'd be no flesh left alive or no flesh saved. And I believe that that's why it is hard to pull on our existence, because we don't know what it's like to be faced with the decisions that they're faced. But Scripture.
Well, you broke out again, Darrin, but I'm so thankful I asked that question, because I like the answer even more than the question is what you had to say. So that was a very good answer, man, to that question. I really appreciate it. So there's ups and downs in this. There's twists and turns. There's conspiracy in here. There's
or maybe chat.
oh, I can hear you now. Oh, now I can't hear you. And there's plot twist, not really plot twists, but there's people that surprise you, the characters that will surprise you, some in good ways and some in bad ways in this book. And without Darrin here, I really don't want to go much further on because there are things that he would have to tell you about. But if in case I don't get him back here real soon, the book is the first part of a series. Darrin has told me that the next book he hopes to have out in August. So we're still a good 10 months out before we'll get the next one in the series, in case I don't get him back. And he's not in the chat room now, so I don't know if he's coming back or not. So what I have to say is, he comes back, we'll ask him some more about it. The bottom line is, the story for me was a good break. For me, it was perfect timing. And I told Darrin that you guys at the beginning of the show, maybe some of you guys can relate. There's a time where you just need to sit back and relax. I mean, you've done study, you've done research, and there's things to contemplate. And sometimes life's busyness or difficulties at work or whatever, sometimes it's good to just go away. You're not really in a place where you want to study. You don't want to just sit idly. And you're like me, I just like to read. For me, this was a rest. For me, this was a mental break without turning off my head, without turning off my mind, right? I got to rest. I got to relax. I got to sit down and, pull the blanket up, grab a cup of coffee, and just sit there and relax. And yeah, a healthy escape, Angie, is a healthy escape. And I think it's necessary. I think Darrin, his gift to us in this is perfect. He was telling me again, and I'm share a private conversation. When he sat down to write, he in his own mind, and I'm not saying this to embarrass him by any means. He said, I don't see myself writing, like a Tom Horn can, or what Timothy Alberino could, or what Steve Quayle or any of these guys could. I don't see myself doing that, but I do. But I wanted to write about that and talk about that kind of stuff. And I think the Father is perfectly suited Darrin with that gift. It's obviously he's a creative mind. His work, the contracting work he does to design and create things, it reminds me of Rob Skiba. Who's the same way. He's in his right mind. The creative part of the mind is where he is. And he's back, and I don't know if he can hear me yet.
Yeah, no, I've been listening for a while. Yeah,
okay.
Take it over, Chad. I just messed things up.
No. And so, and like I said, I'm not saying this to embarrass you, but he had a passion and a desire. It really is a burden when it comes to doing anything for any of us. And I'm speaking to everybody out there. The Father places a burden on you when you begin to ask that question. Maybe even you don't even know yourself that you're verbalizing it yet. You haven't even formed the words, but there becomes a burden to want to serve. And there are things that enter into your mind first for each of us, depending on who we are, for men and women, how that might look in serving the Father. And it becomes a building burden to do something, to not sit idle. And for Darrin, it was creating, this is where his desire, the desire that God put on his heart, led him. And the Father perfectly suited him to us. His gift to us is this book, so that people like me can still enjoy the Father and find rest and wonder and in the creative possibilities that could take place in the future. I'm just telling you right now, if it's a necessary part of the body. We're not simple creatures. We have emotions. We have ups and downs and a spectrum of emotions that can be what we would call mixed, all different kinds of emotions warring within us at once, things that we experience in real life where we can't readily come to answers. And the characters have to deal with these same issues, right? But it's somebody else. Because it's somebody else's issues in a fictional story, it allows me to maybe work through mine without having to consider them right out, right? So he deals with one topic in here that's very hard about, and I'll just come right out and tell this part of the story, and Darrin will have to be mad at me. He's still going to be my friend. but he deals with a hard issue in here about whether to pick up a sword or not pick up a sword. Having to deal with should we fight and deal with the possibilities of having to take a life, or do we not fight knowing that it's going to cost us our own? That's something that he deals with here, and we're allowed to deal with it with him. And I think you did a masterful job of doing that in this book, Darrin. So I don't know if I told you that privately, but I'll say it here publicly. You did a masterful job of that.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed and struggled with that part a lot, but yes, it was significant for me to detail that. Yes, thank you.
Well, it's just beautiful. And so for those of you who aren't, were considering it on the fence, you need, maybe that's a question you had. What does that look like? What does that answer? Well, I believe Darrin did a perfect job of dealing with that issue and a right conclusion to how that would be, dealt with in a real life situation. So, I mean, while it is entertaining, it doesn't shy away from reality and the truth of everything that we're facing today or could be facing today. I very much believe that I could see something, well, maybe it's not going to play out exactly like this. I can see similar scenarios playing out, and me or my children definitely have to face them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting that I think the end times will have exo armors and gravity problems, but it's more of a sci-fi end times parable, and that's what I think of it as. Because as you go through the story, it applies. So much will apply to how it is actually going to unfold, even if the details are different.
Yeah, and Darrin, I really don't know how much more you want to go into this, or if there's anything left unsaid. Like I said, I want to tell people about the book without giving away the story, because I think they really would behoove themselves to read the story themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
is there anything that I haven't
or something? And we can change the subject to anywhere you want to go, Chad.
Well, you tell me what's been on your mind that I haven't touched on yet. I'm reading through this, your series and the breakdown of the chapters. But what's some of the things that you would like to touch on that I haven't asked you about yet?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know exactly where I've cut out on this program and where I. So
well, okay. Another thing. Let's just look at like chapter 10. There's a character in here called Pastor B, and talks about the critical issue of the mark of the beast. You touch on that too. What can you tell us about that?
Well, so I know that. You just hopefully I won't cut out. I don't know. I feel bad for people out there trying to listen, but chips and chips under the skin and that kind of thing gets a lot of votes for possible mark of the beast. And I think that will play into it. I think that it'll play into that you can't buy and sell unless you take the mark and part of the system. But I just see, the unsavable nature of the mark of the beast is pointing to something else, not a chip under the skin. Because I mean, a pacemaker then could be the mark of the beast, making you less than fully human or something. So I just don't see chips as it. Now I could be wrong. I would not die on this theological hill.
And I lost you again. Dadgummit. Well, I tell you what, I'm not gonna drag this out, but I am gonna have Darrin. I'm gonna hold his feet to the fire and have him promise me this is a one-sided agreement. Here in a few months.
I'm back. I don't know where I cut out. I feel bad for.
No, that's okay, Darrin. What I think we're gonna do is we'll probably wrap it up for this segment, because I don't want to do the injustice of being able to speak your mind without having to worry about this. You said you're going to get some better internet here in a few months. We might bring you on then to finish this conversation, but I want to do you justice. And then when the second one comes out, what we'll do is we'll do a disclaimer at the very beginning of that show. And those who have read this book, by the time we get to do the second one, we're not going to hold back. We're going to talk about the characters. I'm going to go all into it. And those who didn't read the book, well, it's just not going to be the show you get to watch. I've told everybody at the beginning, sometimes people aren't going to like this show. Whatever. They don't have to watch every one of them. That's fine. It ain't going to hurt my feelings. But what we'll do then in the second interview, just say, we'll go back and we'll talk about the details of this book. And then we'll share a little bit about what's going on with the second one. Does that sound fair to you?
Yeah, it sounds good. Did you give out my website yet? Do you want me to tell people where they can get the book?
Yeah, tell people where they can get the book. Are there any discounts? Or yeah.
Okay. DarrinGeisinger.com. That's just DarrinGeisinger. DarrinGeisinger.com. And if you plug in SQ 2018, you can get 20% off. So SQ 2018 get you 20% off the book at DarrinGeisinger.com. That's a good deal. It's a great deal. I really thank you, Darrin, for coming on. You know, you and I will be talking here. That's just not going to stop. You're a new good buddy. Really enjoy talking to you. So we'll be in contact. I highly recommend it. You can go to my Facebook page if you want a friend. Darrin on Facebook. He is there. His wife Nikki is on Facebook as well, but I'm recommending you talk to Darrin. Just a great family, very much like any one of us on this journey, but he's got something to share here. I think it's worthy of our time, and I highly recommend it. So with that being said, Darrin, thanks for coming on the show. Thank you, Chad, for having me. I apologize with all my heart.
No, brother. I just want to do you justice. I don't want you to feel like this is your best and going to be your best and only chance at this. So we're going to give you another chance while everything is a little bit more smooth, and I want that for you. So this has been Disputed Lands. I'm Chad Schaefer. It's been another wonderful Monday night. I thank everybody for doing. Darrin, you can turn your camera on if you would briefly for this, because if it works, if it doesn't, we're going to give a high five out there. Give me a high five to your camera.
Okay. Yeah, that's
high five. Nice TV, Disputed Lands, and
get right, get insight, get hungry, word of God appetite. Everlasting water, never again thirsty. To Disputed Lands, take a journey. Observe, interpret, and apply. Detoxify from demon doctrines, get edified. Fight the good fight, stop getting lied to. The kingdom of heaven is inside you.
Holy Spirit guide you.
Mortify your flesh by the scripture magnified. Applied what's amplified, dead corpse gets electrified. Dry bones get flesh, yelling the battle cry. To die is gain, to live is right. Oh yeah, you know that's right. We in this together, grab somebody's hand and hold tight. Study God's word until the world blurs. Fight evil with God's word as the world burns. Holding steadfast as it all crashes and burns. Cause whom devils disturb are preserved by God's word. That's word. Get right, get insight, get hungry, word of God appetite. Everlasting water, never again thirsty. To Disputed Lands, take a journey. Get right, get inside, get hungry, word of God appetite. Everlasting water, never again thirsty. To Disputed Lands, take a journey. Get right, get inside, get hungry, word of God appetite.